Clara Whitmore's knees hit the wooden platform before she even realized she was falling. The telegram was still in her hand. The name Edgar Holloway still pressed into the paper. But the platform was empty. No man, no husband, no welcome. Just Wyoming heat and silence thick enough to choke on. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just knelt there, 27 years old, 2,000 miles from Boston, with $14 sewn into her hem, and absolutely no one in the world expecting her to live past Tuesday. Then a boy's voice split the air. "Mama!" If this story grabs your heart, I invite you to subscribe and follow Clara's journey all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The boy hit her like a freight train. Small arms, thin as rope. But the grip, Lord, the grip was something fierce. He buried his face into Clara's stomach and held on like she was the last solid thing left in the world. She froze. Her hands hovered above his head. Dust-colored hair, sun-cracked skin on the back of his neck. He smelled like hay and soap and something sweet she couldn't name. "Mama," he said again, muffled, desperate. "You came back." Clara's throat closed. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Because this child, this trembling, gasping child, was not hers. She had never seen him before in her life. "Son!" A man's voice, low, rough like gravel dragged across iron. "Noah, let go." The boy didn't move. "Noah, now." Clara looked up. He was tall. That was the first thing. Tall and broad and sunburned in the way only men who worked land from dawn to dark ever got. His hat sat low. His jaw was tight. And his eyes, pale blue, the color of creek water in January, locked onto hers with something that was not kindness. It was warning. "Ma'am," he said, "I apologize."
"He does this." "Does what?" Clara whispered.
The man didn't answer right away. He reached down and peeled the boy's arms off her waist, gentle but firm. The child whimpered, actually whimpered, like a dog being pulled from a warm bed. "Noah," the man said again, quieter now. "That ain't her." The boy looked up at Clara, 8 years old maybe, sunburned nose, eyes that were the same pale blue as the man's, and wet, streaming wet. "She looks like her," Noah said. "She don't." "She does, Pa. She's got the same hair, same hands." The man closed his eyes, just for a second, and in that second, Clara saw something crack across his face. Grief so raw and so deep it made her stomach turn. Then it was gone. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said again, tipped his hat. His mother passed. He gets confused sometimes. Clara nodded. She didn't trust her voice. The man took Noah's hand. The boy looked back at her once, just once, with those drowning blue eyes, and then they turned and walked toward the end of the platform. Clara watched them go. Then she straightened her dress, picked up her carpet bag, and turned to face the town of Ridgewater, Wyoming. It was smaller than she'd imagined. One main road, a general store with a sagging porch, a saloon with its doors propped open, a church steeple at the far end, white paint peeling in the heat. And people. A dozen, maybe more, standing along the street and the platform edge, watching her the way folks watch a dog limping on 3 legs, with pity, but no intention of helping. Clara lifted her chin. She walked to the nearest man, older, gray beard, suspenders, and said clearly, "I'm looking for Edgar Holloway." The man's face changed. It was small, a flicker, but Clara caught it. His eyes shifted left, then down. He took a half step back like she'd said something foul. "Edgar Holloway," she repeated. "I'm his bride. He was supposed to meet me here." Silence. Not the quiet kind, the heavy kind. The kind that falls over a room when someone says the name of the dead. A woman near the general store turned away. A man, leaning against a post, spit into the dirt and shook his head. "Ma'am," the gray-bearded man said slowly, "I reckon you'd better come inside." His name was Harold Pruitt. He ran the general store and had for 22 years. He sat Clara down at a table near the back, poured her water from a tin pitcher, and told her the truth. Edgar Holloway was a fraud. "He's done this before," Harold said. He didn't look at her when he said it. 3 times, maybe 4. Places ads back east. Letters. Real sweet ones, too. Talks about his ranch, his land, his loneliness. Finds women who ain't got family, ain't got options. Gets them to send money for the train. Then he disappears. Clara didn't move. "Last one was a girl from Virginia," Harold continued. "Real young. Maybe 19. She showed up same as you. Same platform, same look on her face. Edgar was already gone. Took her savings, near $200, and vanished. She lasted 3 days before she begged the stagecoach driver to take her back for free." Clara's hands were flat on the table. She stared at them. "Where is he now?" she asked. Harold shrugged. "Could be anywhere. Could be in the next territory by now. Sheriff Briggs filed a complaint, but ain't nobody coming out here to chase a man over a few $100s and some broken promises." "A few $100s," Clara repeated. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I truly am." Clara picked up the tin cup, drank, set it down. Her hand was steady. "I sent him $140, she said. "It was everything I had. Everything I'd saved in 3 years of work." Harold winced. "I have $14 left, sewn into my hem. I have no return ticket. I have no family in Boston. My mother is dead. My father left before I could walk. The boarding house where I worked gave my room away the day I left." She looked at Harold. "So when you say he's done this before, I need you to understand something, Mr. Pruitt. He didn't just take my money. He took my life. Every option I had, every door I could have walked through. He shut them all, took the handles, and left me standing in an empty room." Harold stared at her. "I ain't telling you this for pity," Clara said. "I'm telling you because I need work. I need a roof, and I need it today. Not tomorrow. Today." Harold rubbed his jaw. "Ma'am, Clara, my name is Clara Whitmore." "Miss Whitmore, this ain't a big town. There ain't much work for I can read. I can write. I can do arithmetic faster than most men I've met. I kept books at a boarding house for 3 years. I can cook, clean, sew, and teach. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance." The door opened. Clara didn't turn around, but she felt the room shift. Harold's eyes went past her, and something in his expression softened. "Daniel," Harold said. "Harold." It was the man from the platform, the tall one, Noah's father. Clara heard his boots on the wood floor, slow, deliberate steps. He stopped beside the table. She could feel him standing there, but didn't look up. "Miss Whitmore," Daniel said. She looked up. "My son wants me to apologize again." "You already did." "He wants me to do it better." Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The ghost of one, maybe. Clara studied him. Up close, the lines around his eyes were deeper than she'd first thought. Not age lines, tired lines. The kind that come from not sleeping right for a long time. Noah says I was rude, Daniel continued. He says I pulled him away too rough and didn't ask if you were all right. I'm fine. You're not, though, are you? It wasn't a question. Clara held his gaze for 3 full seconds before she answered. No, mister. Brooks, I am not fine. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. He removed his hat and set it on the table. His hair was dark, cut short, and there was a scar along his left temple. Thin, white, old. Harold told you about Holloway? Daniel asked. He did. And you've got no way home? That is correct. Daniel looked at Harold. Harold looked at the floor. I've got a ranch, Daniel said, 4 miles north. It's just me and Noah. My wife Sarah passed 2 winters ago. Fever took her in January, and Noah, he ain't been the same since. Clara waited. I ain't offering you nothing improper, Daniel said, and his voice got harder when he said it, like he was daring someone to suggest otherwise. I've got a spare room. It was Sarah's sewing room. It's small, but it's clean. You can stay there until you figure your situation. And what would people say? Daniel's jaw tightened. People say plenty already. They've been saying I can't raise that boy alone since the day Sarah died. They've been saying I drink too much, work too hard, don't go to church enough. I stopped caring what people say about 6 months after I buried my wife. Clara folded her hands. I don't want charity, Mr. Brooks. Good, 'cause I ain't offering it. They looked at each other. Noah needs looking after, Daniel said. I can't work the ranch and mind him both. Not properly. He ain't been to school in 4 months because I can't get him there and get my cattle fed before noon. He don't eat right. He don't sleep right. Daniel stopped, worked his jaw. He latches on to every woman who walks through this town because he misses his mother so bad he can't breathe sometimes. Clara's chest ached. So here's what I'm offering. Room, meals, fair wages, $1 a week. You mind Noah. Help with the books if you can. It ain't Boston. It ain't easy. But it's honest. $1 a week, Clara said. That's what I can afford. I want 2. Daniel blinked. Harold let out a small cough that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. $2, Clara said. I keep the books, I mind Noah, and I teach him reading and arithmetic. That's 3 jobs, Mr. Brooks. $2 is fair. Daniel stared at her. Something shifted in those pale blue eyes. Something that looked, for just a moment, like respect. Fine, he said. $2. And I eat at the table, not in my room, not standing, at the table, like a person. I wouldn't have it any other way. Clara stood. She picked up her carpetbag. Then I accept. The ride to the ranch was 4 miles of dust and silence. Daniel drove the wagon. Clara sat beside him. Noah sat between them, pressed against Clara's side like a burr stuck to wool. Nobody spoke for the first mile. Then Noah said, Do you like horses? I've never been near one. Noah looked at her like she'd said she'd never seen the sun. Never? Not once, Pa. She's never seen a horse up close. I heard her, son. Can I show her Biscuit? After supper. But Pa! After supper, Noah. The boy went quiet, but he reached over and put his hand on Clara's arm, just resting it there, like he needed to make sure she was real. Clara didn't pull away. The ranch appeared after the 3rd mile. A low house, white paint going gray. A barn twice the size of the house. Fences stretching in every direction. And beyond it all, open land so vast it made Clara's chest go tight. She had never seen sky like that. In Boston, the sky was something you saw in pieces, between buildings, above rooflines. Here it was everything. It went from one edge of the world to the other, and it was so blue it hurt. Daniel pulled the wagon up near the house and set the brake. "It ain't much," he said. "It's more than I had this morning," Clara answered. He looked at her then, really looked, and whatever he saw made him nod once, slow, like something had been decided that couldn't be undecided. Inside, the house was clean but spare. A kitchen with an iron stove, a main room with 2 chairs and a stone fireplace, a hallway with 3 doors, one for Daniel's room, one for Noah's, and one smaller door at the end. Daniel opened the last door. The room was small, a narrow bed with a quilt that had been washed so many times the pattern was barely visible. A wooden chair, a small table by the window, and in the corner, a sewing basket with needles still stuck in the pincushion, thread still wound around a spool. Sarah's sewing basket. Clara looked at it, then at Daniel. "I didn't move her things," he said. His voice was rough. "Noah wouldn't let me." "I won't touch them. I'm not asking you not to. I'm just telling you they're there." Clara set her carpetbag on the bed. "Mr. Brooks?" "Daniel. Daniel, thank you." He nodded, pulled the door halfway shut, then stopped. "Miss Whitmore?" "Clara." He paused. "Clara, Noah's going to get attached to you. Fast. Probably already is." "I know." "I need you to understand. If you leave, it's going to break him. Again. And I don't know if he can take another breaking." Clara met his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, Daniel. I have nowhere to go." It was the most honest thing she'd said all day. Daniel held her gaze for a long moment. Then he put his hat back on and walked away. His boots were heavy on the hallway floor, and the sound of them faded into the kitchen, where she heard him open a cupboard and set something on the counter. Clara sat on the bed. She pressed her hands flat against the quilt. She breathed in dust, wood, old lavender. And for the first time since she'd stepped off that train, she let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. She'd been cheated, robbed, abandoned in a territory she didn't know by a man she'd never met. She had no money, no connections, no safety. But she had a room. She had wages. She had a boy who looked at her like she was an answer to a prayer he'd been whispering every night for 2 years. And she had a man who didn't offer her pity, didn't offer her romance, didn't try to save her. He offered her work. Clara Whitmore opened her carpetbag and began to unpack. That first night, she could hear Noah through the wall. He was talking to someone. Soft, urgent whispers that rose and fell like waves. Clara pressed her ear to the wood. "And she's real nice, Mama. She's got brown hair like yours, but longer. And she talks different, like the people in Pa's books. But she's not mean different. She's nice different." A pause. "I know she ain't you. I know that. But Pa's real sad, Mama. He don't say it, but I can hear him at night. And maybe if she stays, he won't be so sad no more." Another pause. "I'll be good, I promise. I'll be so good she won't want to leave." Clara pulled away from the wall. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed both hands over her mouth. She did not cry. She refused. But her whole body shook. Down the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Then the soft sound of a bottle being set on a table. Then silence. The long, heavy silence of a man sitting alone in a dark kitchen, trying to figure out how everything had gotten so hard. And outside, the Wyoming night pressed against the windows, hot and dry and full of stars that neither Clara nor Daniel bothered to look at, because neither of them believed in wishes anymore. But that boy, in his small bed, with his face turned toward the wall and his mother's memory wrapped around him like a blanket, that boy still did. And sometimes, that's enough. Clara woke before dawn because she didn't know how to sleep past it. 3 years in a Boston boarding house had trained her body like a clock. Up at 4, stove lit by 4:15, first pot of coffee by 4:30. It didn't matter that she was 2,000 miles from that kitchen now. Her hands still reached for an apron that wasn't there. She dressed quietly, pulled her hair back, opened the bedroom door slow enough that the hinges wouldn't cry. The hallway was dark. Daniel's door was shut. Noah's was cracked open, and she could hear his breathing. Deep, even. The kind of sleep only children and the truly exhausted ever find. Clara walked to the kitchen. She stopped. Daniel was already there. He was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a lantern turned low. His shirt was half buttoned. His eyes were red. And on the table beside his cup sat a bottle, whiskey, half empty, and a small photograph in a wooden frame, face down. He looked up when she entered. Neither of them spoke for 5 full seconds. "Didn't mean to wake you," Daniel said. "You didn't. I wake early." "How early?" 4, sometimes before. He stared at her like she'd said something unreasonable. Then he pushed back his chair and stood. "Coffee's on the stove. Cups are in the cabinet above the basin." He picked up the bottle, picked up the photograph, walked past her without another word, and disappeared into his room. The door closed. Not slammed, just closed, firm and final. Like a man shutting a chapter he wasn't ready to read aloud. Clara poured herself coffee. It was strong enough to strip paint. She drank it anyway. By sunrise, she had swept the kitchen floor, organized the pantry, which was near empty, scrubbed the table, and found a crack in the window frame above the basin that was letting dust blow in from the east. She stuffed it with a strip of cloth torn from her spare petticoat. When Noah stumbled out of his room at 6:30, rubbing his eyes with both fists, he found Clara standing at the stove. "Morning," she said. He blinked. Then his face broke open into a grin so wide it nearly split him in half. "You're still here." "I told you I would be." "I know, but sometimes people say that and then they're not." Clara turned back to the stove. She had found flour, lard, salt, and 3 eggs. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Sit down," she said. "Breakfast in 5 minutes." Noah sat. He watched her the way a cat watches a bird, unblinking, perfectly still, afraid that any movement might scare her away. When Daniel came back into the kitchen 20 minutes later, fully dressed, hat in hand, he stopped in the doorway. Noah was eating. Actually eating, not pushing food around his plate the way he'd done for months, but shoveling biscuits into his mouth with both hands, talking between bites about Biscuit the horse, and whether Clara would like her, and whether Biscuit would like Clara, because Biscuit was particular about people, Pa. She don't like just anyone. Daniel looked at the plate in front of his son, then at the stove, then at Clara. "You cook?" he said. "I do." "There's a plate for you," she added. On the counter. Daniel picked it up. 2 biscuits, scrambled eggs, coffee already poured. He sat down across from Noah and ate without a word. But when he was done, he set his fork down and said, quiet, "That's the first full meal he's eaten in I don't know how long." Clara didn't answer. She just washed the dishes. The first week passed like that, in small, careful pieces. Clara learned the rhythms of the house, the way a person learns to walk after an injury. Slowly, testing each step, waiting for pain. She learned that Daniel left before dawn and didn't come back until the light turned gold. She learned that he ate fast, spoke little, and thanked her for every meal like she was doing him a favor he didn't deserve. She learned that he kept Sarah's things exactly where they'd been the day she died. Her shawl on the hook by the door, her Bible on the shelf in the main room, her garden gloves on the windowsill, stiff and cracked from 2 summers of sun. She learned that he drank every night. Not falling down drunk, not violent, just steady, quiet drinking. The kind that fills silence the way water fills a hole. 1 glass, 2 glasses, sometimes 3. And then he'd sit in the dark kitchen, and Clara would hear the chair creak, and then nothing. She learned not to mention it. She learned Noah faster. Noah was easy to read because he hid nothing. He was hungry, not for food, though he ate everything Clara put in front of him, but for presence, for someone to answer when he spoke, for someone to say, "Good morning," and "Good night," and "How was your day?" and mean it. He followed Clara everywhere, to the well, to the clothesline, to the chicken coop, where she discovered 3 hens Daniel hadn't collected eggs from in over a week. "Pa forgets," Noah said. "Then we won't forget," Clara answered. He helped her gather eggs. He held the basket with both hands, serious as a judge, and counted each one aloud. 7, he announced.
7 is good. Is it enough? For what? For staying.
Clara knelt in front of him, right there in the dirt beside the coop, with feathers in her hair and egg dust on her fingers. "Noah, listen to me. 7 eggs is not why I'm staying." "Then why?" "Because I gave your father my word, and where I come from, your word is the only thing nobody can take from you." He searched her face. Whatever he found must have been enough, because he nodded once, picked up the basket, and walked toward the house. Then he stopped and turned around. "Miss Clara?" "Yes?" "Can you teach me to read today?" "Right after lunch." He grinned, and Clara felt something crack open inside her chest, something she'd kept locked shut since her mother died, something warm and terrifying. She ignored it. She had work to do. By the end of that first week, Clara had established order. Meals at fixed times, Noah's reading lessons after lunch, laundry on Tuesdays, eggs every morning. She found Daniel's ranch books in a drawer in the main room, a leather ledger so disorganized it made her teeth ache, and spent 2 evenings straightening the accounts. When she showed Daniel the corrected numbers on Saturday night, he sat at the table and stared at the pages for a full minute. "You found an error," he said. "I found 11. He looked up at her. "The feed supplier in town has been overcharging you since March," Clara said. 30 cents extra per delivery. Over 5 months, that's $4.50. You can do arithmetic." "I can do arithmetic fine. I just can't sit still long enough to check a ledger." "Then it's good I can." He closed the book, rubbed his face with both hands. "Sarah used to do this," he said. And then he stood up and left the room, and Clara heard the bottle come out of the cabinet, and she didn't say a word. On Sunday, Clara and Noah walked to town for church. Daniel didn't come. Clara didn't ask why. The church was small and hot and packed full. Every pew, every seat. And when Clara walked in with Noah holding her hand, every head turned. She felt it, the weight of 30 pairs of eyes, the whispers that started before she even sat down. A woman in the second row leaned to her neighbor and said, just loud enough, "That's the one, the mail-order bride." Another woman, thin-lipped, bonnet pulled tight. "Living out there with Daniel Brooks. No ring, no chaperone. Lord knows what kind of arrangement that is." Clara sat down. Noah pressed close to her side. The preacher, a young man with kind eyes and an unfortunate stammer, gave a sermon about mercy. Clara barely heard it. She was too busy counting the people who wouldn't look at her. After the service, a woman approached. Round face, steel gray hair, apron still dusted with flour like she'd come straight from her kitchen. "You're the Whitmore girl," she said. "I am. I'm Martha Briggs. My husband's the sheriff."
"Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Briggs."
Martha studied her. Hard, appraising eyes, but not cruel. Calculating. "You cooking for Daniel and that boy?" "I am." "Cleaning? Minding Noah?" "Yes, ma'am." Martha grunted. "About time somebody did. That man's been drowning for 2 years and too stubborn to say so." She leaned closer. "You watch yourself, though. This town talks, and not everybody talks kind." "I've noticed." "Good. Then you're not stupid." Martha reached into her bag and pulled out a jar of blackberry preserves. "For the boy. Tell Daniel I said he needs to fix his south fence before his cattle end up in my husband's yard again." She turned and walked away before Clara could respond. Noah tugged Clara's sleeve. "Mrs. Briggs is scary." "Mrs. Briggs is honest. Those are different things." On the walk home, Noah talked non-stop about the sermon, about the other children he'd seen at church, about how Tommy Sullivan had a new dog, and it only had 3 legs, but could still run faster than any dog in the territory. Clara listened. She answered. She asked questions. And somewhere between the town road and the ranch gate, Noah reached up and took her hand again. Not grabbed, not clutched. Just slipped his small fingers into hers, easy and natural, like they'd been doing it for years. Clara held on. She held on tight. That night, Daniel was at the kitchen table when she came out for water. Bottle in front of him, lantern low. She should have turned around, gone back to her room. That was the smart thing. She didn't. She sat down across from him. Daniel looked at her. His eyes were glassy, but not gone. He was at the 2-glass stage, loose enough to talk, tight enough to regret it later. "Noah had a good day," Clara said. "He tell you about the 3-legged dog?" "Twice." Almost a smile. Almost. "He's reading better," Clara said. "He's smart, Daniel. Really smart. He just needs someone to sit with him." Daniel turned his glass in a slow circle. "Sarah was the one who sat with him. I was always out there." He gestured vaguely toward the darkness beyond the window. "Working, building, fixing things that didn't need fixing because I didn't know how to be inside a house without feeling like the walls were closing in." He took a drink. "After the war, I couldn't stand being indoors. Still can't most days." Sarah understood that. She held the inside together. I held the outside. And it worked. Until it didn't. Clara waited. "When she got sick," Daniel said, and his voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, "I didn't know what to do. I tried to fix it the way I fix fences. More blankets, more firewood, more broth.
Like if I just worked hard enough, I could keep her alive by sheer stubbornness."
He set the glass down. "She died on a Tuesday. Noah was in the room. He held her hand the whole time. 8 years old, holding his mother's hand while she—" He stopped. Clara did not reach across the table. She did not touch his hand. She did not say, "I'm sorry," or "I understand," or any of the empty things people say when they're afraid of someone else's pain. She said, "Tell me about her." Daniel looked up, surprised, like nobody had asked him that in a long time. "She was funny," he said. People don't. They remember her being kind, being gentle, being good. And she was all those things. But she was funny. She could make me laugh so hard I'd lose my breath. And she had this way of looking at me when I was being stubborn. This one look, where she'd tilt her head and raise one eyebrow, and I'd know, just know, that I was wrong about whatever I was arguing about. He almost laughed. The sound caught in his throat and died there. She would have liked you, he said. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not. But she liked people who pushed back, and you push back plenty. Clara allowed herself a small smile. Go to bed, Daniel. You telling me what to do in my own house? I'm telling you that bottle isn't going to bring her back, and tomorrow morning Noah's going to need his father sober. The air went still. She'd gone too far. She knew it the second the words left her mouth. Daniel's face hardened. His hand tightened on the glass. She saw his jaw work, saw the anger flash across those pale eyes like lightning across a flat sky. She didn't look away. 10 seconds. 15. Daniel pushed the bottle toward the center of the table. You always this bossy? Always. He stood, picked up his glass, walked to the basin and poured the whiskey out. Not the bottle, just the glass. But it was something. Good night, Clara. Good night, Daniel. He walked down the hall, his door closed. Clara sat in the quiet kitchen and listened to her own heartbeat and thought, I should not have said that. That was not my place. He is my employer. This is not my home. That is not my battle. But her hands were shaking, and she knew it was because she recognized that bottle. She recognized that look. Her mother had worn it every night for the last 3 years of her life, after Clara's father disappeared, and the money ran out, and the world got too heavy to carry sober. And Clara had watched her mother drown in it. She would not watch it again. Not here. Not him. Monday morning, a man rode out to the ranch. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the horse. She turned and saw a rider coming up the road. Not Daniel, who'd left hours ago for the north pasture. Someone else. A man she didn't recognize, sitting tall in the saddle with a hat pulled low and a coat that was too heavy for July. He stopped 20 yards from the house. Help you? Clara called. He didn't answer right away. Just sat there, looking at her, looking at the house, looking at the barn. This the Brooks place? He asked. It is. Mr. Brooks is out working. Can I take a message? The man tilted his head, smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, all teeth, no warmth, like a dog baring its gums. You must be the new one, he said. Clara's spine straightened. Excuse me? The bride. The one Holloway left at the station. I don't know who you are, sir. Name's Wyatt Sims. I run the saloon in town. He leaned forward on his saddle horn. I'm looking for Edgar, actually. He owes me money. Quite a bit of it. And I heard a rumor he might be heading back this way. Clara's hands went still on the clothesline. Back? She said. That's what I said. Why would he come back? Wyatt Sims shrugged. Edgar always comes back. That's his pattern. He runs, he hides, he waits till everyone calms down, and then he slithers back to clean up whatever he left behind. His eyes locked onto hers, and from what I hear, he left quite a bit behind this time. Clara felt cold despite the heat. If you see him, Sims said, you tell him Wyatt Sims wants his $300, and you tell Daniel Brooks to lock his doors. He tipped his hat, turned his horse, rode back toward town without looking back. Clara stood there, both hands gripping the clothesline rope, knuckles white. She stood there until her arms ached. That evening, she told Daniel. He was washing up at the basin outside the back door, arms bare, water running down his forearms. She told him everything. Sim's visit, the warning, the claim that Edgar might return. Daniel didn't react the way she expected. No anger, no fear. He just dried his arms with a rag, slow and methodical, and said, "Wyatt Sims is a drunk and a gossip. He seems serious."
He's always serious when someone owes him money.
"Daniel, he said Edgar comes back." Daniel hung the rag on the nail by the door. He looked at her, and in the fading light, his eyes were impossible to read. "If Edgar Holloway sets foot on my property," Daniel said, "I will handle it." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." He walked inside. Supper was quiet. But that night, Clara heard something she hadn't heard before. Daniel didn't drink. He didn't sit in the kitchen. Instead, she heard him in the main room, and the sound was unmistakable. Metal sliding against metal. The steady, deliberate rhythm of a man cleaning a rifle. He cleaned it for a long time, and when he finally stopped, the silence that followed was worse than any sound Clara had ever heard. Because it was the silence of a man preparing for something he hoped wouldn't come, but knew probably would. Clara lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, Sarah's sewing basket in the corner catching moonlight through the window. And for the first time since she'd arrived in Ridgewater, Wyoming, she was afraid. Not of Edgar Holloway, not of the town. She was afraid because somewhere between the biscuits and the reading lessons and the three-legged dog and the poured-out glass of whiskey, this place had stopped feeling like a stranger's house. It was starting to feel like hers. And Clara Whitmore knew better than anyone that the things you start to love are always the things you lose. 3 weeks. That's how long the quiet held. 3 weeks of biscuits at dawn and reading lessons after lunch, and Noah's laughter filling rooms that hadn't heard it in 2 years. 3 weeks of Clara balancing Daniel's books, finding 2 more overcharges from the feed supplier, saving him another $6 he didn't know he was losing. 3 weeks of Daniel coming home each evening to a table set for 3, food still warm, Noah already talking before his father's boots were off. 3 weeks of something that felt, dangerously, like peace. Clara should have known it wouldn't last. It was a Thursday when everything cracked open. She remembered that later. Thursday, because she'd just hung the week's laundry and was teaching Noah the word territory when the sound of hooves came up the road. Fast hooves, not Daniel's steady pace. This was someone riding hard. "Stay inside," Clara told Noah. "But inside, now." Something in her voice made the boy obey without argument. He backed away from the table, eyes wide, and pressed himself against the wall near the hallway. Clara stepped onto the porch. It was Sheriff Briggs, a broad, weathered man with a silver star pinned crooked on his vest. He pulled his horse up short and didn't bother dismounting. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "Daniel here?" "North pasture." "What's wrong?" Briggs took off his hat, rubbed his forehead, put the hat back on. That sequence alone told Clara everything she needed to know, because men like Briggs didn't fidget unless the news was bad. "Edgar Holloway was spotted in Rawlins 2 days ago," Briggs said, "heading west." Clara's hands gripped the porch rail. "Rawlins is 60 miles from here," Briggs continued. "On horseback, that's 2 days. Maybe less if he's pushing hard." "Why would he come back?" Briggs looked at her, really looked, the way people do when they're deciding how much truth a person can handle. "Because he always comes back, Miss Whitmore. Edgar don't leave loose ends. He comes back, he smooth talks, He cleans out whatever's left. Last time, he convinced the girl from Virginia to give him her last $20 before he disappeared again. Told her he'd been robbed, that the marriage was still on, that he just needed a little more time. And she believed him? She was desperate. Desperate people believe things they know ain't true. Clara's jaw tightened. I'm not desperate, Sheriff. No, ma'am, I don't reckon you are. But I'm telling you anyway, because forewarned is forearmed, and I'd rather you hear it from me than find him standing on this porch one morning. He gathered his reins. Tell Daniel. He'll know what to do. Briggs rode off, and Clara stood on that porch until the dust from his horse settled back onto the road. Then she went inside, sat down at the table across from Noah, and said, Sound out the next word for me. Territory. Good. Again. Territory. Perfect. And she kept her hands flat on the table so the boy wouldn't see them shaking. Daniel came home at dusk. Clara told him on the porch, out of Noah's earshot. She kept her voice steady. She gave him the facts. Rollins, 2 days, heading west. Daniel listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he stood very still for a long moment, and then he said, You scared? Should I be? I'm asking if you are. Clara crossed her arms. I'm angry, Daniel. There's a difference. He nodded, slow, like that was the right answer. Here's what's going to happen, he said. Nothing changes. You do your work, I do mine. Noah stays close to the house. If Edgar shows up here, you don't engage. You take Noah inside and you bolt the door. And what will you do? What needs doing? That's not a plan, that's a threat. It's both. Clara stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head to look up at him. I am not going to hide behind a locked door while you play gunfighter, Daniel Brooks. That man took everything from me. My money, my future, my dignity. If he shows his face, I have a right to stand in front of him and say so. Daniel's eyes searched hers. Something moved behind them. Frustration, maybe. Or admiration. Hard to tell with a man who kept everything locked behind a jaw that could cut glass. You're the stubbornest woman I ever met, he said. Your wife would have said the same thing to you, and you know it. The words landed hard. Daniel flinched. Actually flinched, like she'd struck him. And Clara immediately wished she could pull them back. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have... No. Daniel's voice was quiet, raw. You're right. She would have. He looked out past the porch, past the fence, towards something Clara couldn't see. Sarah would have loaded the rifle herself, he said, and she was a better shot than me. He turned and went inside, and for the first time, he didn't reach for the bottle. The next morning, Martha Briggs came to the ranch. She arrived in a buckboard loaded with supplies: flour, sugar, salt pork, a bolt of calico fabric, and a jar of something she called medicinal tonic that smelled strongly of whiskey and peppermint. Don't look at me like that, Martha said when Clara raised an eyebrow. It's for emergencies. What kind of emergency requires whiskey and peppermint? The kind where a man named Edgar Holloway shows up at your door and you need something to steady your hands before you shoot him. Clara almost laughed. Almost. Martha came inside, sat down at the kitchen table like she owned it, and proceeded to tell Clara everything the town knew about Edgar Holloway. He was from Pennsylvania originally. Good family. Education. Charm enough to light a room on fire. He'd moved west after the war. Tried ranching. Failed. Tried mining. Failed. And eventually discovered that the easiest way to make money was to take it from women who had no one to protect them. He places ads in Eastern papers, Martha said. Always the same story. Lonely rancher, good land, needs a wife. He picks women with no families, no connections, women who won't be missed. How many? Clara asked. Martha hesitated. How many, Mrs. Briggs? That we know of? 7, across 3 territories. Clara sat down. The sheriff filed reports, Martha continued, sent telegrams, but Edgar moves like smoke. By the time law catches up, he's 3 towns ahead, with a new name and a new story. Then why does he come back? Martha leaned forward. Because he's not just a thief, Clara. He's something worse. He likes it. The power, the control, knowing he can walk into a town where everyone knows what he's done and still make people doubt themselves. He came back to Ridgewater after the Virginia girl, walked into the saloon, bought a round of drinks, and told everyone she'd made the whole thing up, that she was unstable, hysterical. Martha's voice went hard. Half the town believed him. Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. He's going to do the same thing to me, she said. He's going to try. What do I do? Martha reached across the table and put her hand on Clara's arm. Her grip was strong, calloused. The hand of a woman who'd spent 50 years surviving a world that wasn't built for her. You don't run, Martha said, and you don't hide. When he comes, and he will come, you stand up straight, you look him in the eye, and you tell the truth. Because the truth is the one thing Edgar Holloway has never been able to outrun. Edgar Holloway rode into Ridgewater on a Saturday afternoon. Clara was in town. She'd come with Noah to pick up supplies at Harold's store, and they were walking back to the wagon when she heard the murmur. It started at the far end of the street. A ripple, a shift, the way a pond moves when a stone drops in. People turned. People stopped talking. A woman pulled her child closer. Clara looked. A man on a chestnut horse, riding slow down the center of the main road like he owned every inch of dirt beneath him. Medium build, clean-shaven, dark hair combed neat under a new hat. Clothes too fine for Wyoming, city clothes, pressed and polished, the kind that said money even when there wasn't any. He was smiling. Clara knew him before she knew him the way you know a storm before the sky changes, by feel, by instinct, by the way the air goes wrong. Noah, she said, get in the wagon. Who's that? Get in the wagon now. Noah climbed up. Clara stood beside the wagon and watched Edgar Holloway ride past the saloon, past the general store, past the church. He tipped his hat to a woman on the boardwalk. She turned away. He didn't stop smiling. He pulled up in front of Harold's store and dismounted, tied his horse to the post, straightened his coat, and then his eyes found Clara. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he owns, not with love, not with anger, with entitlement. The bored, certain gaze of someone who has never been told no by anyone who mattered. Well, he said, you must be Clara. She didn't answer. I have to say, you're prettier than I expected from the letters. He took a step forward. You've done well for yourself. I hear you're living with Daniel Brooks now. Got yourself a nice arrangement. I work for Mr. Brooks. Of course you do. Another step. Listen, Clara, I know how this looks. I know what people have told you. But there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I was called away on business, urgent business, and by the time I got back, you'd already... Stop! Clara's voice cut the air like a wire pulled taut. Edgar blinked. I sent you $140, Clara said. I sold everything I owned. I left the only city I'd ever known. I traveled 2,000 miles on a promise you made in a letter. And when I arrived, you were gone. No message, no explanation, nothing. Clara, if you just let me explain, there is nothing to explain. I spoke with Harold Pruitt. I spoke with Sheriff Briggs. I spoke with Martha Briggs.
I know about the girl from Virginia. I know about the others. 7 women, Mr. Holloway. 7 women you robbed and abandoned." The smile was gone now. Edgar's face had tightened, and something ugly moved behind his eyes. Something cold and calculating, like a snake deciding whether to strike or retreat. "Those women are liars," he said. "Every one of them. Bitter, lonely women who couldn't handle the realities of frontier life and decided to blame me for their own—" "Don't." Clara took a step forward. People were gathering now. Harold had come out of his store. Martha Briggs stood on the boardwalk across the street, arms folded, watching. The preacher was there, the feed supplier, women with children, men from the saloon. Half the town, standing in the July heat, watching. "Don't you dare call them liars," Clara said. "I was one of them. I stood on that platform with $14 to my name and no way home. I know exactly what you are, Mr. Holloway. You are a thief." "A liar and a coward." Edgar's charm crumbled. Underneath it was something she hadn't expected. Rage. Pure, white-hot, humiliated rage. "You watch your mouth," he hissed. "You're nothing. A servant girl from Boston, with no name, no family, no—" "She's got family." Daniel's voice came from behind Clara. She didn't know when he'd arrived. Didn't know how long he'd been standing there. But when she turned, he was 10 feet behind her, hat low, hands at his sides, standing the way men stand when they've already decided how far they're willing to go. Edgar looked at Daniel. Something flickered across his face. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. The recognition that this was not the Virginia girl, alone and broken. This was different. "Brooks," Edgar said, forced a smile. "This doesn't concern you." "It does. She's not your wife." "No, she's not. She's a woman standing on a public street telling the truth, and you're going to listen to every word, or I'm going to make you listen." "Your choice." Edgar's eyes darted, calculating exits, calculating angles. The smile came back, thinner this time, desperate. "Clara," he said, turning back to her, voice dropping to something soft, intimate. The voice he used in letters, she realized. The voice that made women believe. "Clara, sweetheart, I made mistakes, I know that. But I came back. Doesn't that count for something? I came back for you." "You came back for money," Clara said. "That's all you've ever come back for." "That's not true. I am not property, Mr. Holloway." Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't shake. She stood in the center of that street, and she said the words so clearly that every person in Ridgewater heard them. "I was never yours. Not when I answered your ad. Not when I sent my money. Not when I stepped off that train. I was never, ever yours. And I never will be." Edgar's face went white, then red. His hand shot forward and grabbed Clara's wrist. Daniel moved, but someone got there first. Noah. He climbed down from the wagon without anyone seeing. 8 years old, barely 4 feet tall, skinny as a fence post. He stepped between Clara and Edgar and looked up at the man with those pale blue eyes, his father's eyes, his mother's fire, and said, "Let her go." Edgar looked down at the boy. Shock wiped everything else off his face. "Let her go right now," Noah said. His voice cracked. His whole body was trembling. But he didn't move. He planted his boots in the dirt and stood there like a wall. Edgar released Clara's wrist. Daniel was there in 2 strides. He put his hand on Noah's shoulder, not pulling him back, not pushing him aside, just standing with him. Father and son, side by side, between Clara and the man who'd tried to take everything from her. "You heard her," Daniel said. Low, steady, final. "And you heard my son. Now I'm going to tell you once, Holloway. Walk away." Edgar looked at them, Clara, Daniel, Noah, then at the crowd. 30 people, 40, all watching, all silent. Not a single face sympathetic. "This isn't over," Edgar said. "Yes, it is." Sheriff Briggs stepped forward from the crowd. He'd been watching the whole time, Clara realized. Waiting. Letting it play out. Letting Clara say what needed saying. "Edgar Holloway," Briggs said. "I've got warrants for your arrest out of Rawlins, Cheyenne, and Laramie City. Fraud. Theft. Outstanding debts, including $300 to Wyatt Sims, who is standing right over there and would very much like his money back." Sims tipped his hat from the saloon doorway. "You can come quiet," Briggs said. "Or you can make this difficult. But I should warn you, my wife is watching, and she's been waiting 2 years to see you in handcuffs. I'd hate to disappoint her." Martha Briggs, from the boardwalk, called out, "Don't you dare disappoint me, Henry!" A few people laughed. Nervous laughter, but real. Edgar looked at Briggs, at the badge, at the crowd, and the calculation in his eyes shifted from, "How do I win this?" to, "How do I survive this?" He held out his wrists. Briggs cuffed him, led him toward the jailhouse. The crowd parted to let them through, and as Edgar walked, people turned their backs, one by one. Not dramatic, not rehearsed, just quiet, deliberate rejection. Martha Briggs spit in the dirt as he passed. "That's for the Virginia girl," she said. Edgar Holloway didn't look back. Clara stood in the street. Her wrist throbbed where he'd grabbed it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She was breathing hard. She hadn't realized it until now, but she was breathing like she'd been running. Daniel touched her elbow. "You all right?" "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I said I'm fine." He didn't push. He just stood there, close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him, and waited. Noah took her hand, the left one, the one Edgar hadn't grabbed. He held it with both of his, the way he held the egg basket. Careful, precious, like something he was terrified of dropping. "Miss Clara?" "Yes, Noah?" "You were so brave." Clara looked down at him. This boy, this small, trembling, fierce boy, who had stepped in front of a grown man because someone he loved was in danger. "No, sweetheart," she said. "You were." Harold Pruitt came out of his store and pressed a cup of water into Clara's hand. She drank it. Martha brought a chair out onto the boardwalk and made Clara sit. The preacher offered a prayer. 3 women Clara had never spoken to came over and introduced themselves, one after another, like a dam had broken. "I'm Ellen Shaw. You need anything? You come to me." "I'm Harriet Cole. My daughter is Noah's age. They should play together." "I'm Ruth Avery. I heard what you said to that man. I just want you to know. My sister answered one of those ads once. She wasn't as strong as you." Clara nodded. She thanked them. She held Noah's hand. She drank the water. And something had shifted. She could feel it in the way people looked at her now. Not with pity, not with suspicion, but with something that felt, impossibly, like respect. Like she belonged. Daniel loaded the wagon. He lifted Noah onto the seat. Then he turned to Clara and held out his hand to help her up. She took it. His hand was rough, calloused, warm. He held hers for exactly 1 second longer than necessary. Then he let go, walked around to the other side,
and climbed up. They rode home in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not the careful, measured silence of strangers, not the heavy silence of grief. It was the silence of people who had stood together in the middle of a storm and come out the other side, still standing. Noah fell asleep between them before they reached the ranch, his head tipping against Clara's arm, his breathing deep and even. Daniel glanced over, saw the boy asleep, saw Clara's hand resting on Noah's hair. He looked back at the road, and Clara, watching his profile against the fading light, saw something she hadn't seen before. Not gratitude, not attraction. Something quieter, something that lived deeper than either of those. Trust. Daniel Brooks trusted her. And God help her, she trusted him back. That night, for the first time since she'd arrived at the ranch, the bottles stayed in the cabinet. Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and when Clara came out for water, he looked up and said, "Sit with me a minute?" She sat. "What you did today," Daniel said, standing up to him like that, in front of the whole town. "It needed doing." It did, but needing doing and actually doing it are two different things. Most people know the right thing. Not many have the spine to do it. Clara turned her cup in her hands. "He grabbed my wrist. I saw. Noah stepped in front of me. I saw that too." Daniel's voice thickened. "Scared me half to death. He's braver than he knows. He gets it from his mother." Clara looked at Daniel. He looked back. And in the low light of the kitchen, with coffee between them, and the night pressing in, and Noah sleeping safe down the hall, something passed between them that neither of them named, because naming it would make it real, and real things could be taken away. "Good night, Daniel," Clara said. "Good night, Clara." She walked to her room, closed the door, sat on the bed. Sarah's sewing basket sat in the corner, catching moonlight. Clara looked at it for a long time. Then she reached over and straightened the spool of thread that had come loose. It was a small thing, nothing really, but it was the first time she'd touched any of Sarah's things. And she did it gently, the way you touch something that belongs to someone you wish you'd known. The morning after Edgar's arrest, Clara found something on the kitchen table that hadn't been there the night before. A key. Small. Iron. Old. Sitting on a folded piece of paper. She picked up the paper. Daniel's handwriting. Rough. Slanted. The letters pressed hard into the page, like he'd been fighting the pencil. "Front door. So you don't have to wait for me to let you in." Clara held the key in her palm. It was warm from sitting in the morning sun that came through the kitchen window. She closed her fingers around it and stood there for a long time, feeling the weight of it. Not the iron, but the meaning. In 3 years at the boarding house in Boston, she'd never had a key. She slipped it into her apron pocket and started breakfast. Something had changed in Ridgewater after the confrontation with Edgar. Clara felt it every time she went to town. People who had avoided her eyes now nodded. Women who had whispered behind their hands now spoke to her directly. Harriet Cole brought her daughter to the ranch to play with Noah, a wild, red-haired girl named Penny who could climb a fence faster than most boys twice her size. Ellen Shaw stopped by with a basket of tomatoes from her garden and stayed for coffee. Ruth Avery sent a letter inviting Clara to the women's sewing circle that met every other Wednesday at the church. Clara went. She sat in that circle with 8 women she barely knew and sewed a straight hem while Martha Briggs held court from her chair in the corner, dispensing opinions on everything from the price of flour to the territorial governor's latest tax proposal. "You sew tight," Martha observed, watching Clara's hands. "I learned from my mother." "She teach you to stand up to men like Holloway, too?" "No, ma'am. She taught me what happens when you don't." Martha looked at her for a long beat. Then she nodded once, the way Daniel nodded. Slow, weighted, final. "Good," Martha said.
Some lessons are better learned by watching than by doing. After the meeting, Ruth Avery walked Clara to the wagon.
"Can I ask you something personal?" Ruth said. "You can ask. I might not answer." Ruth smiled. "Fair enough. Daniel Brooks. What's he like? At home, I mean, because in town he barely says 10 words. People think he's cold." Clara thought about the man who cleaned his rifle in the dark, who poured out his whiskey because she told him to, who gave her a key and left it on the table because he couldn't hand it to her face to face. "He's not cold," Clara said. "He's careful. There's a difference." Ruth studied her with knowing eyes. "You like him. He's my employer." "That's not what I asked." Clara climbed onto the wagon. "Good night, Mrs. Avery." Ruth laughed. "Good night, Clara. You just answered my question anyway." Clara drove home in the dark, her face hot, and she told herself it was the July heat. It was not the July heat. She'd started noticing things, dangerous things. The way Daniel rolled his sleeves when he washed up at the basin, forearms brown and roped with muscle. The way his voice dropped when he talked to Noah at bedtime, low and soft. A voice she heard through the walls, reading stories she couldn't quite make out. The way he said her name, not Miss Whitmore, not ma'am, just Clara, with a weight on the first syllable that made it sound like something more than a name. She noticed he'd stopped drinking entirely, not tapered off, stopped. The bottle was still in the cabinet. She checked once, hating herself for checking. But the level hadn't moved in 2 weeks. She noticed he'd started fixing things around the house. The window frame she'd stuffed with petticoat cloth. He replaced the whole frame. The step on the porch that creaked. He pulled it up and laid a new board. The chair at the kitchen table that wobbled. He shimmied the leg with a piece of oak so precise it looked factory-made. He never mentioned any of it, never said, "I fixed this for you." He just did it, quietly, the way a man tends to a thing he's decided matters. Clara noticed all of it, and she was terrified, because the last time she'd trusted a man's actions, she'd ended up standing on a platform in Wyoming with $14 and a broken future. And before that, she'd watched her mother trust a man who promised the world and delivered nothing but empty rooms and silence. Clara Whitmore did not trust easily. She had built her life on the principle that hoping for things was a luxury she couldn't afford. And now, here she was, hoping. It made her furious. She threw herself into work. She reorganized Daniel's entire filing system, such as it was, and created a proper ledger with dated entries, categorized expenses, and projected costs through the fall. She found that Daniel was spending too much on hay because he was buying from the wrong supplier. She wrote a letter to a ranch in Laramie that sold for 30% less and negotiated delivery terms by mail. When she showed Daniel the numbers, he stared at the paper for a long time. "You saved me $40, he said. $43. In 1 month. I'm good at this, Daniel." He looked up at her. "I'm starting to figure that out." She taught Noah every day now. The boy was ravenous for learning. He devoured words the way he devoured biscuits, fast and grateful. Within a month, he'd gone from sounding out simple words to reading full sentences aloud. Clara found an old copy of Robinson Crusoe on Daniel's shelf. Sarah's, she suspected, from the neat handwriting on the inside cover, and began reading it to Noah each night after supper. Daniel sat in the main room during these readings. He pretended to mend tack or sharpen tools,
But Clara caught him listening. She caught him mouthing the words along with her, caught the corner of his mouth turning up when she did the voices, a deep growl for Crusoe, a high chatter for the parrot. One night, Noah fell asleep mid-chapter, slumped against Clara's side with the book still open on her lap. Clara looked up and found Daniel watching them. Not the book, not Noah, her. Their eyes met. The lantern was low, the house was quiet, and in that silence something enormous pressed against the walls of the room. Something that had been building for weeks, gaining weight and warmth, and neither of them had the courage to name it. Daniel looked away first. "I'll carry him to bed," he said. He stood, crossed the room, and lifted Noah with one arm. The boy was light, too light, all bones and elbows, and carried him down the hall. Clara heard him murmuring as he settled Noah into bed. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was so tender it made her chest hurt. When Daniel came back, Clara was standing. She had the book closed and pressed against her chest like a shield. "He's getting heavier," Daniel said. "He's eating better." "Thanks to you." "Thanks to regular meals. Any decent cook could have done the same." "But they didn't. You did." They stood there, 6 feet apart. The lantern flickered between them, throwing shadows that jumped and settled and jumped again. "I need to tell you something," Daniel said. Clara's heart slammed. "All right." "The ranch is doing better. The books, the new hay supplier, cutting waste. I'm clearing more this month than I have since Sarah died." He paused, worked his jaw. "I can afford to pay you $3 a week now." Clara blinked. That was not what she'd expected him to say. $3, she repeated. "You earned it. More than earned it." "Thank you." Silence again. Daniel shifted his weight, looked at the floor, looked at the ceiling, looked everywhere except at her. "There's something else," he said. "What?" "Noah asked me something this morning. At breakfast, after you went to gather eggs." "What did he ask?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "He asked if you could stay forever." Clara's breath caught. "I told him that wasn't my decision," Daniel continued, "that you're a grown woman with your own mind, and it wouldn't be right for me to ask you to—" "What did he say?" Daniel almost smiled. He said, "Then ask her, Pa. What's so hard about asking?" Clara laughed. It came out sudden and sharp, surprising both of them. She pressed her hand over her mouth, but it was too late. The sound was already in the room, alive and warm, and Daniel was looking at her like he'd never heard anything so remarkable. "He's 8 years old," Clara said, "and he's smarter than both of us." "He gets that from his mother." The laughter faded. They were back to standing in the quiet, and the thing between them pressed harder. "I'm not asking you to stay forever," Daniel said, carefully. Each word chosen like a man stepping through a field he knows is mined. "I'm asking if you want to, because there's a difference, and I need to know which one it is." Clara set the book down on the chair. "Why?" "Because if you're staying out of obligation, because you've got nowhere else to go, because you feel sorry for Noah, because you made a deal and you're the kind of person who keeps deals, then I need to know that. And I'll respect it. And I won't—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "You won't what?" Clara whispered. "I won't let myself feel something I've got no right to feel." The room went still. So still, Clara could hear the clock in the hallway ticking, could hear a coyote somewhere far off, could hear her own blood moving through her veins. "Daniel." "Yeah?" "I'm staying because I want to." He looked at her. Those pale blue eyes, creekwater eyes, The same eyes that had looked at her on the train platform 5 weeks ago, with nothing but warning. They looked at her now with something so raw and so open that Clara had to fight the urge to turn away. Because no one had ever looked at her like that. Not once in her entire life. "Okay," Daniel said, quiet, almost a whisper. "Okay." He didn't move toward her, didn't reach for her hand, didn't make a single gesture that crossed the line between what they were and what they might become. He just nodded, picked up the lantern and said, "Good night, Clara." "Good night, Daniel." He walked down the hall, stopped, turned back. "Clara?" "Yes?" "I'm glad the train brought you here." He disappeared into his room before she could respond. Clara stood alone in the dark main room with her hand over her heart and thought, "I am in terrible, wonderful trouble." The days after that conversation carried a different charge. Nothing had changed, and everything had changed. They still ate at the same table, still worked the same routines, still said good morning and good night with the same careful distance. But underneath, the ground was shifting. Clara caught Daniel watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Caught herself watching him the same way. They orbited each other like two planets held by a gravity neither could see, close enough to feel the pull, careful enough never to collide. No one noticed. Of course no one noticed. Children always notice. "Pa smiled at breakfast," Noah announced one afternoon during his reading lesson. "Your father smiles." Not like that. That was a real smile. The kind Mama used to get him to do. Clara redirected him to his book, but her hands trembled on the pages. One evening, Daniel asked Clara to help him with the south fence. Martha Briggs had been right. The cattle were getting dangerously close to wandering onto her husband's property, and Daniel needed an extra pair of hands to hold the wire while he drove the posts. They worked side by side in the late afternoon heat. Clara held the wire taut while Daniel swung the hammer. He was efficient, precise. 3 strikes per staple, never 4. They moved down the fence line in rhythm, not speaking, not needing to. Clara's hands bled. The wire was rough, and she didn't have gloves. She hid it for as long as she could, tucking her fingers against her palms when Daniel looked her way. But he noticed. He always noticed. "Let me see." "It's nothing." "Clara?" She opened her hands. The wire had cut across both palms, shallow lines, beaded with blood. Daniel took her hands in his, turned them over. His thumbs pressed gently against the edges of the cuts. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because the fence needed fixing." "The fence ain't worth your hands." "My hands are tougher than they look." He was still holding them. Clara was acutely aware of every point of contact, his rough fingers against her raw palms, the heat of his skin, the steadiness of his grip. He held her hands the way he held everything, firm but careful, like a man who'd learned the hard way that the things he held could break. "Come inside," he said. "I've got salve." He cleaned her cuts at the kitchen table. He was gentle, more gentle than she'd imagined a man with hands that size could be. He wrapped thin strips of clean cloth around each palm, tying them off with small, precise knots. "Sarah taught me this," he said. "She was always cutting herself in the garden. Said I tied better bandages than the doctor in town." She was probably right. Daniel finished the last knot. He didn't let go of her hand. "I haven't talked about her this much since she died," he said. "Not to anyone. Not to Noah, even. And with you, I don't know why, but with you, it doesn't hurt the same way." Clara waited. "It still hurts," he said. "Don't mistake me. I'll love Sarah till they put me in the ground. But the kind of hurt, it's different now. It's not the kind that makes me want to drink until I can't feel it. It's the kind that makes me want to remember, to keep her alive by talking about her instead of burying her deeper every day. His thumb moved across her bandaged palm. Slow, barely there. You did that, he said. I don't know how, but you did. Clara's eyes burned. She blinked hard. You did it yourself, Daniel. I just gave you someone to talk to. That ain't nothing. That's everything. He released her hand, stood up, washed the salve off his fingers at the basin. Clara sat at the table with her bandaged hands in her lap, and she thought about her mother. About how her mother had waited her whole life for a man to come back and save her. Had waited until the waiting killed her. Clara wasn't waiting for anything. She wasn't waiting for Daniel to save her. She wasn't waiting for a proposal, or a promise, or a declaration. She was sitting in a kitchen she'd organized, looking at books she'd balanced, listening to a boy she'd taught to read, practicing his words down the hall. She had built this. Not Daniel, not luck, not a man's charity. She had built it with her own 2 bleeding hands. And that was something no one could take from her. Not Edgar Holloway, not the Whispering Town, not even fear. That Saturday, Noah asked Clara to read from Sarah's Bible. They were sitting on the porch after supper. Daniel was inside, cleaning up. He'd started doing that, washing dishes after the evening meal. A small thing that Clara noticed like she noticed everything now. Mama used to read to me from it, Noah said. Every night. But after she died, Pa put it on the shelf and nobody touched it. Are you sure you want me to? Yes, ma'am. Clara went inside, took the Bible from the shelf. It was heavier than she expected. Thick leather, worn soft, with pressed flowers between the pages. The spine fell open naturally to Psalms, the pages so well thumbed they were translucent. She brought it back to the porch and sat down beside Noah. Daniel appeared in the doorway. He saw the Bible. His face did something complicated. A dozen emotions moving through it so fast Clara couldn't catch them all. Pain, surprise, grief. And then, slowly, carefully, something like permission. He sat down on the other side of Noah. Clara opened to the page that was most worn, the one Sarah must have read 100 times, and began. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Noah leaned against her shoulder. Daniel rested his elbows on his knees and stared at his hands. Clara read, And when she got to, Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Noah whispered along with her, word for word, and Daniel's hand came up and covered his eyes, and his shoulders shook once, just once, and then were still. Clara kept reading. She read until Noah's breathing went slow and even, until the boy was asleep against her arm, just like always, heavy and warm and trusting. Daniel lifted his hand from his eyes. They were wet. He didn't apologize for it. Thank you, he said. You don't have to thank me. I know, but Sarah would want me to. He picked up his sleeping son and carried him inside. Clara sat on the porch with the Bible in her lap, open to Psalms, pressed flowers falling like whispers into her hands. The wind was shifting. She could feel it. Not the Wyoming wind. Something deeper. Something inside the walls of this house. Inside the spaces between 3 people who'd been broken in different ways and were, piece by piece, learning how to hold each other's weight. Clara closed the Bible. She pressed her bandaged hand flat against the worn leather cover and felt, beneath her palm, the ghost of another woman's fingers. A woman she'd never met, who had loved this book, this boy,
this man. A woman who had held this family together until she couldn't anymore. "I'll take care of them," Clara whispered. Not to God, not to the night, to Sarah. "I promise." The wind carried it somewhere. Clara didn't know where, but she hoped it was far enough. Clara smelled it before she saw it. She was at the kitchen table, working through Daniel's August accounts when the air changed. Not the usual dry Wyoming heat, something sharper, bitter. The kind of smell that crawls into your throat and sits there. Smoke. She put down the pencil, stood, walked to the front door, and opened it. The sky to the south was wrong. Not blue, not even gray. It was the color of a bruise, dark amber bleeding into brown, rolling low and thick across the horizon like something alive. "Noah," Clara said. The boy was on the porch, playing with a wooden horse Daniel had carved him. He looked up. "Go inside. Get the water pails, every one you can find. Fill them from the well, now." Noah didn't argue. He dropped the horse, scrambled to his feet, and ran inside. Clara's heart was hammering. She'd never seen a wildfire. She'd read about them. Everyone in the territory had stories. But reading was not the same as watching that sky darken like the Lord was closing a lid over the earth. She ran to the barn. Daniel's horse was there, already agitated, stamping and pulling at its tether. Clara grabbed a saddle blanket, soaked it in the water trough, and draped it over the horse's back. She didn't know if that was right. She didn't know anything about fire. But wet was better than dry. That much she understood. She freed the chickens from the coop. They scattered, squawking, and she let them go. Animals knew better than people where to run. She was dragging the second water pail from the well when she heard hooves, fast, coming from the north. Daniel appeared on the road at a dead gallop, his horse lathered, his hat gone, his face streaked with soot. He pulled up hard and was off the horse before it stopped moving. "How far?" Clara shouted. 2 miles, maybe less. Wind's pushing it northeast." He grabbed her arms. "Where's Noah?" "Inside, filling pails." "Good. Listen to me. The barn's got a fire break on the west side. I dug it last spring. If the fire stays south, the house should be clear. But if the wind shifts, what do we do?" "We fight it. And if we can't fight it, we run." Clara nodded. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "Tell me what to do." Daniel looked at her, soot on his face, sweat cutting lines through the dirt, chest heaving from the ride. He looked at her the way a man looks at the one person in the world he trusts to stand beside him when everything is burning. "Wet everything," he said. "The porch, the walls, the roof if you can reach it. Soak every piece of cloth you can find and pack them around the base of the house. I'm going to widen the fire break." He turned toward the barn. "Daniel," he stopped. "Be careful." He held her gaze for 1 second. Then he ran. The next hour was chaos. Clara worked like she'd never worked in her life. She hauled water until her arms screamed. She soaked blankets, sheets, curtains, anything that would hold moisture, and pressed them against the walls of the house. Noah worked beside her, silent and focused, carrying pails that were almost too heavy for his thin arms. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just worked, jaw set, teeth clenched. His father's son through and through. The smoke thickened. Clara's eyes streamed. Her lungs burned. She wrapped a wet cloth around Noah's face and tied it behind his head. "Breathe through this," she said. "What about you?" "I'll be fine." "You need one too." "Noah, Miss Clara, please." She tore another strip and tied it over her own mouth and nose. The boy nodded, satisfied, and went back to hauling water. Daniel came back from the fire break covered in dirt up to his elbows. He'd widened it by 3 feet on each side, a raw gash of turned earth between the south field and the house. It wasn't much. Against a real fire, driven by wind, it was barely a speed bump. But it was what they had. "Wind's holding southwest," Daniel said. He was breathing hard. "If it stays, the fire'll pass west of us. Burn the south pasture, but miss the house." "And if it doesn't stay?" Daniel didn't answer. The fire reached the south pasture at 4:30. Clara heard it before she saw it. A sound like nothing she'd ever imagined. Not a roar, not a crackle. A voice. Low, deep, continuous, like the earth itself was groaning. And then the wall of flame crested the ridge, and Clara understood for the first time why people compared fire to a living thing. It moved. It breathed. It made decisions. And right now, it was deciding whether to turn east toward the house or keep running west toward open range. "Get Noah inside," Daniel said. "No, Clara, I am not leaving you out here alone. This ain't a discussion. You're right, it's not. Noah, get inside. Stay away from the windows. Do not come out until one of us comes for you." Noah looked at his father, looked at Clara. Then he ran inside and slammed the door. Clara grabbed a wet blanket and stood beside Daniel. "You are the most stubborn," Daniel started. "Save it. Where do you need me?" He stared at her for one furious, terrified, grateful second. Then he pointed toward the south side of the barn. "Embers. The wind's going to throw them. If they land on the barn roof, it'll go up in 10 minutes. I need you to watch for spots and smother them before they catch." "I can do that." "If the fire turns, you run. You grab Noah and you run north. Don't wait for me. Don't look back." "Daniel, promise me." Clara grabbed his arm. "I promise that if I have to, I will get Noah out. But I am not promising to leave you behind. Don't ask me to do that." His jaw worked. She could see him fighting it, every instinct telling him to order her inside, to protect her, to keep her safe the way he hadn't kept Sarah safe. She could see it all playing out behind those blue eyes, and she stared right back, daring him to try. He didn't. "Stay low," he said. "Watch the roof. And for God's sake, keep that cloth over your face." They split. Daniel went to the fire break with a shovel and a prayer. Clara took her position by the barn with a soaked blanket and a bucket of water. The embers came 20 minutes later. They floated in like fireflies, orange sparks drifting on the heated air, lazy and beautiful and deadly. The first one landed on the barn roof, and Clara was up the ladder before she'd consciously decided to climb. She pressed the wet blanket over the spot, held it, felt the heat through the fabric, and smothered it. Another landed near the chicken coop. She jumped down, ran, stamped it out. Another on the porch railing. She threw water. Another, and another, and another. She lost count. She lost time. The world narrowed to a single, desperate rhythm. Spot the ember, reach the ember, kill the ember. Her lungs screamed from the smoke. Her hands, still healing from the fence wire, cracked open again. Blood mixed with soot and water on her palms, and she didn't feel it. Then the wind shifted. It came fast, a sudden gust from the south that hit like a fist. The fire, which had been drifting west, lurched, turned, found a new path, straight toward the house. "Clara!" Daniel's voice, raw, ragged, barely audible over the roar. "Get Noah! Get him now!" Clara dropped the blanket and ran. She hit the front door at full speed, threw it open. "Noah! We have to go!" The main room was empty. "Noah!" She ran down the hallway.
His bedroom, empty. Daniel's room, empty. The sewing room, her room, empty. "Noah!" She heard it then, a thin, high sound, barely audible under the fire's voice, coming from outside, from behind the house. Clara ran through the kitchen and out the back door. Noah was in the yard, 30 feet from the house, standing frozen, staring at the wall of fire cresting the south ridge. He'd gone out. He'd gone out to find them. And now the smoke was so thick he couldn't see the house, couldn't see anything. And he was standing there with his arms at his sides, small and terrified and utterly lost. "Noah!" He turned. His face was streaked with tears and soot. Clara ran to him. The heat was enormous. It pressed against her skin like a physical weight, like the air itself was trying to push her back. She reached Noah, grabbed him, lifted him off the ground with strength she didn't know she had. "Hold on to me," she said. "Don't let go." He wrapped his arms around her neck. His legs locked around her waist. He was heavier than she expected. 50 pounds of terrified boy clinging to her with everything he had. She turned toward the house. The smoke was blinding. She couldn't see the back door. She couldn't see anything except orange light and swirling gray. She ran. She didn't know which direction. She ran on instinct, on terror, on the animal's certainty that if she stopped moving, they would both die. Embers rained around them. The heat was unbearable. Noah screamed into her neck, and she held him tighter and ran. Her foot hit the porch step, and she nearly fell. The back door. There. She threw herself through it, stumbled through the kitchen, through the main room, out the front door, and collapsed on the ground 20 feet from the house. Noah still locked around her, both of them gasping and coughing and alive. Daniel found them there. He came around the side of the house at a dead run, shovel still in his hand, face wild with a terror Clara had never seen on any human being. "Noah!" He dropped the shovel. "Clara!" He fell to his knees beside them. His hands went to Noah first, pulling the boy off Clara, checking his face, his arms, his hands. "I'm okay, Pa," Noah coughed. "Miss Clara got me. She picked me up and she ran." Daniel pulled Noah against his chest and held him. One arm. The other arm reached for Clara. She took it. He pulled her in. All three of them on the ground, tangled together, coughing and shaking and holding on. Daniel's arm was around her shoulders, tight, fierce, and she could feel his heart slamming against his ribs, could feel the tremors running through his body. "You went back for him," Daniel said. His voice broke on the last word. Actually broke, like a bone snapping. "The fire was right there, and you went back." "Of course I did. You could have died." So could he. Daniel pressed his forehead against the top of her head. She felt his breath in her hair, felt his arm tighten until it almost hurt. "Don't ever do that to me again," he whispered. "Don't you ever." The fire passed. It burned the south pasture. It scorched the fence Daniel had just repaired. It blackened the ground within 40 feet of the barn. But the firebreak held. The wet walls held. The house stood. They sat on the porch in the aftermath and watched the smoke thin and the sky slowly, painfully return to blue. Noah was asleep in Daniel's lap, out cold. The boy had fought until his body simply couldn't anymore, and he dropped like a stone 5 minutes after the fire passed. Daniel held him with both arms and hadn't put him down since. Clara sat beside them. Her hands were raw. Her lungs ached. Her dress was ruined, burned in 3 places, soaked, filthy. She was the most exhausted she'd ever been in her life. She'd never felt more alive. "Clara." "Yeah." Daniel was looking at her. Not the way he'd looked at her before, not with careful distance, not with the measured restraint of a man guarding himself against feeling too much. He looked at her with everything open, every wall down, every door unlocked. "I need to say something," he said, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond." "All right." He shifted Noah gently against his chest, took a breath. "When Sarah died, I made a decision. I decided that I'd already had my chance. That God, or fate, or whatever, gives a man one good woman in his life, and I'd had mine, and that was it. Anything else would be greedy. Anything else would be dishonoring her memory." Clara listened. "And then you showed up, on a platform, in the heat, with $14 and a telegram from a man who didn't exist. And my son ran to you like he'd been waiting for you his whole life." His voice thickened. He cleared his throat. "I fought it. You know I did. I fought it every day. Every time you made Noah laugh. Every time you sat across from me at that table. Every time you pushed back when I was being stubborn, which was often. I told myself it was just gratitude, just convenience, just loneliness looking for a place to land." He looked down at Noah, sleeping in his arms. "But tonight, you ran into smoke and fire to save my son. And the whole time you were gone, those 30 seconds or however long it was, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I knew was that if I lost you—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "If I lost you, it would break me the same way losing Sarah did. And you don't feel that way about someone out of gratitude. You don't feel that way about your housekeeper." Clara's eyes were burning, and it had nothing to do with smoke. "I'm not asking you to replace Sarah," Daniel said. "Nobody could. I'm not asking you to be Noah's mother. You're already more than that. You're the person who chose him when nobody asked you to. And I'm not asking you to love me. That's your decision, and I'll live with whatever you decide." He met her eyes. "What I am asking is this. If you stay, let it be because you want this life, not because you've got nowhere else to go, not because you feel obligated, not because Noah needs you even though he does. Stay because you looked at this broken-down ranch and this broken-down man and this beautiful, brave boy, and you thought, that's mine. I want that to be mine." Clara was crying. She didn't realize it until she felt the tears on her chin, and she wiped them with the back of her hand and left a streak of soot across her cheek. She thought about Boston, about the boarding house, about her mother, who waited her whole life for a man who never came back, about the telegram, about the train, about the platform, about a boy's voice screaming, "Mama!" across the dust. She thought about biscuits at dawn, and reading lessons, and three-legged dogs, and a poured-out glass of whiskey, about a key left on a kitchen table, about bandaged hands and Bible verses, and a sewing basket in the corner catching moonlight. She thought about running through fire with a child in her arms, and how it was the easiest decision she'd ever made. "Daniel," she said. "Yeah." "I already chose." He stared at her. "What?" "I chose this life the day I unpacked my carpet bag in that little room. I chose it when I told your son that 7 eggs was enough. I chose it when I sat across from you in that kitchen and told you to put the bottle down. I chose it every single day I stayed, not because I had nowhere to go, but because every morning I woke up and thought, I want this." She reached over and put her hand on his arm. Her palm was raw, bandaged, bleeding through the cloth. "You asked if I wanted this life," Clara said. "I want this life. I want your terrible coffee. I want your stubborn jaw, and your clean rifle, and your son who's braver than any man in this territory. I want the south fence that's going to need fixing again by September. I want this porch, and these stars, and this ridiculous, beautiful, impossible place." She leaned closer. "And I want you, Daniel Brooks. Not because I'm desperate, not because I'm grateful, because you are the first man in my life who offered me work instead of pity, and respect instead of promises. And I would rather spend the rest of my life in this God-forsaken Wyoming heat with you and that boy than anywhere else on earth." Daniel made a sound, not a word. Something deeper, a breath that had been held for 2 years, finally released. He reached over with his free hand, the one not holding Noah, and cupped her face. His palm was rough and warm and trembling. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said. "And if that's not all right, you'd better say so in the next 2 seconds." "It's all right." He kissed her. It was not a dramatic kiss. It was not a sweeping, cinematic storybook kiss. It was careful and slow and a little clumsy, the way kisses are when two people have been alone for a very long time and have forgotten how. His lips were chapped. Her face was wet. Noah was asleep between them. It was the best kiss Clara Whitmore had ever had. When they pulled apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "Sarah would have liked you," he said again. "You said that before." "I meant it both times." Clara laughed. It was a watery, shaky, exhausted laugh. The laugh of a woman who had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man who didn't exist, and instead found a family she didn't know she was looking for. Noah stirred in Daniel's arms. His eyes opened, foggy with sleep. "Pa, why is Miss Clara crying?" "She's happy, son." Noah looked at Clara, then at his father, then at the space between them, the space that used to hold 2 years of grief and loneliness and silence, and now held something else entirely. "Are you staying?" Noah asked. Clara wiped her eyes. "I'm staying." "Forever?" "Forever." Noah reached out with one hand and took Clara's. Then he reached with the other and took Daniel's. He held them both, his small fingers laced through theirs, and he looked up at the sky with those pale blue eyes, creekwater eyes, his father's eyes, and said, "Mama would have wanted this." Daniel closed his eyes. His hand tightened around Noah's. "Yeah, son," he said, rough, thick, breaking and healing in the same breath. She would have. They sat there on that porch as the last of the smoke cleared and the Wyoming sky opened up above them, bruised and beautiful and wider than any sky Clara had ever seen. 3 people on a porch. A man who had buried his grief and found something growing in its place. A woman who had come west for a lie and stayed for the truth. And a boy, a small, fierce, faithful boy who had prayed for a family every night for 2 years and refused to stop believing until one showed up on a train platform with a carpet bag and $14. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn. She dressed, pulled her hair back, opened the bedroom door. Daniel was in the kitchen. Coffee was already made. 2 cups sat on the table, and beside them, Sarah's sewing basket, moved from Clara's room to the kitchen, placed at the center of the table with a fresh spool of thread on top. Clara looked at it, looked at Daniel. "Noah moved it," Daniel said, "last night, before bed. He said it belonged out here now, where the family is." Clara sat down. She picked up her coffee. She looked at the sewing basket and the fresh thread and the man across the table who was watching her with those steady, open, broken and healed again eyes. "Good morning, Daniel." "Good morning, Clara." And outside, the sun came up over Wyoming the way it always did. Slow, golden, indifferent to the small, enormous miracles happening in small, ordinary houses. It lit the burned pasture and the standing barn and the freshly turned fire break. It lit the porch where a boy sat with a wooden horse, waiting for breakfast. It lit a road that stretched east toward a train station where, 6 weeks ago, a woman had fallen to her knees in the dust and believed she had nothing. She had everything. She just hadn't known it yet. Sometimes the train doesn't take you where you plan to go. Sometimes it leaves you standing in the dust with nothing but a name on a telegram and a prayer you're too tired to finish. But sometimes, if you're stubborn enough to stay, brave enough to fight, and foolish enough to believe that broken things can be mended, it leaves you exactly where you belong. Clara Whitmore belonged here, and she was never leaving.